The map is a trick. It's a fool's errand to a silver mine that doesn't exist. The real treasure is something else entirely. It's a fool's a trick.
Rancher gives water to wounded native. What he faced next day were hundreds of arrows stuck in his fence. The blood trail led straight to the canyon's edge. I'd seen enough wounded animals in my 50 years on this god-forsaken ranch to know the difference between a deer's blood and something else entirely. It was a dark, almost black, stain against the red dust of the Arizona desert, and it promised a tale of violence I had no wish to hear. But when I followed those crimson drops around a jagged rock formation, what I found made my hand freeze on the rifle I hadn't carried in years. The memory of the long walk of the Navajo, the bitter taste of defeat, and the endless march of a nation in chains still haunt my dreams. I was a young cavalry soldier then, a boy of 18, tasked with enforcing an order I didn't understand. And now, here was a remnant of that very past, a reminder of the man I used to be. A young Navajo woman lay crumpled against the stone wall of a wash, one hand pressed desperately against a gaping wound in her side, the other reaching weakly toward a small, broken water gourd that had long since emptied its contents. Her breathing came in sharp, painful gasps, and her dark eyes, though clouded with pain, tracked my every movement with the alertness of someone who expected death to come from any direction. This was 1878, the kind of year when finding an Indian on your property, especially in the canyons, meant one thing: trouble. The kind of trouble that could get a man scalped in his sleep or burned alive in his own home. Every rancher within 50 miles would tell me the same thing: put a bullet in the savage's head and bury her deep where no one would ever find the body. This was the law of the desert, the unwritten code that had been drilled into me during my years as a gunslinger, when I'd ridden down the same trails, hunting the same people. But something in her dark eyes stopped me cold. It wasn't just pain I saw there. It was the same desperate thirst I'd felt during the long walk, when my detachment had gone 3 days without water, and I'd thought I might die from it. The same human need that transcended skin color, language, or which side of a war you were born into. The girl tried to speak, her lips cracked and bleeding, but only a whisper came out. "Ta, I need water." She spoke in her native tongue. I lowered my rifle and reached for my canteen. My neighbors would call me a fool. My brother back east would say I'd lost my mind to the frontier loneliness. Hell, maybe they'd be right. But as I knelt beside this wounded stranger and pressed the cool metal to her lips, watching her drink like a woman saved from drowning, I knew one thing for certain: I was about to change both our lives forever. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. I watched every gulp, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd just done. In this territory, showing mercy to an Indian, especially a Navajo, was like signing your own death warrant. The hatred was a thick, palpable thing, a legacy of broken promises and spilled blood. But as the color slowly returned to the woman's face, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The wound in her side wasn't from an animal attack or a hunting accident. It was a bullet hole, fresh, still bleeding, and judging by the angle and the powder burns around the edges, someone had shot her at close range, recent close range, which meant whoever had done this might still be looking for her, might be tracking that same blood trail that led straight to my land, might be riding toward my property right now with guns loaded and questions I couldn't answer. The woman, whose dark eyes now held a spark of life, seemed to sense my fear. With great effort, she struggled to her feet, using the stone well for support. Blood immediately began seeping through her fingers where she pressed them against her wound. Her message was clear: danger was coming soon. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to drag this wounded stranger away from my property. Hide the evidence. Pretend this never happened. But the woman could barely stand, let alone walk. Moving her now would probably kill her, and leaving her here was like hanging a target on both our backs. That's when I heard it, the sound that had kept me alive through 30 years of frontier living. Hoofbeats in the distance, multiple horses riding hard and fast, coming straight toward my ranch. The Navajo woman heard them too. Her eyes went wide with what looked like genuine fear, and she tried to make herself smaller. I grabbed my empty canteen and doused the blood trail as quickly as I could, but there was no time to clean it all. The riders would be here in minutes, maybe less. I looked down at the wounded woman, this stranger who had stumbled into my life and turned it upside down in the span of a single afternoon. A woman whose presence on my ranch could get us both killed, but whose dark eyes held something I had never seen in a Navajo before. Gratitude. Pure human gratitude. The hoofbeats were getting closer now, close enough to count them. 5 horses, maybe 6, all moving at a gallop that suggested they weren't coming for a friendly visit. I made my choice in that split second, knowing it might be the last choice I ever made. I couldn't carry the wounded woman, but I could hide her. The old root cellar behind the barn. But as I reached down to help her to her feet, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and shook her head slowly. Then she did something that made my skin crawl. She smiled. Not the grateful smile of a woman being saved, but the knowing smile of someone who understood exactly who was coming over that hill. The riders came over the ridge like a storm cloud bringing lightning. 6 men on horseback, dust billowing behind them, rifles glinting in the afternoon sun. I recognized the lead rider immediately. Vulture Vance. He was an ex-soldier turned bounty hunter, a name I hadn't spoken in decades. A name that was a ghost from my past. Vance was the kind of man who collected scalps as trophies and called it justice. The kind of man who would burn down a ranch and everyone in it if he suspected them of harboring fugitives. I stood in front of the wash, my body blocking the Navajo woman from view, trying to look like a man who had nothing more pressing on his mind than fixing a broken fence post. My mouth felt dry as desert sand. Vance reined in his horse just 10 feet away, close enough that I could see the cold calculation in his pale blue eyes. The other 5 men spread out in a semicircle, hands resting on their weapons. This wasn't a social call. "Afternoon, Cal," Vance said, his voice carrying the lazy drawl of a man who knew he held all the cards. "We're a hunting party." A wounded Indian was seen this way. I felt sweat beading on my forehead despite the cool evening air. "Haven't seen any Injuns, Vance. Been working on the south fence all day." Vance's eyes swept across the ranch, taking in every detail. He missed nothing. It's what made him so dangerous. His gaze lingered on the dark stains in the dirt near the wash, and I felt my stomach drop. "That so?" Vance dismounted slowly, deliberately. "Because that sure looks like blood to me. Fresh blood. And unless you've been butchering cattle next to your drinking water, I'd say someone's been here recently." Behind me, hidden by the rock formation, the wounded Navajo woman remained perfectly still, but I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat from a forge. One sound, one movement, and we were both dead. Vance took 3 steps closer, his hand now resting openly on his pistol. "You know what the penalty is for harboring Injun fugitives, don't you, Cal? It's the same penalty as for treason, a rope around the neck until dead." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I felt every muscle in my body coiled tight as a spring, ready to fight or run, knowing neither option would save us. Vance was too close now. Any sudden movement would expose the Navajo woman, and once that happened, bullets would start flying. I was about to accept my fate, to let the past finally catch up with me, when something impossible happened. The woman behind me spoke, not in her native tongue, but in perfect English, a string of words that flowed with the clarity of a canyon spring. "Don't you recognize him, Vance?" she said, her voice weak but steady. "Caleb Hayes. The man who gunned down my father in a saloon fight. The one you ran away from after I swore to take revenge." Vance froze mid-step, and the color drained from his face like water from a broken bucket. His hand fell away from his pistol. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. And when he finally found his voice, it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Dear God, you're him. You're the one who ran." The other 5 riders immediately dismounted, their weapons forgotten, their faces showing the same mixture of shock and something that looked almost like fear, but not the kind of fear men show when facing an enemy. The kind of fear men show when they realize they've just made a terrible, terrible mistake. I was so caught off guard by the revelation that I barely registered the woman's next words. She spoke again, this time in a stronger voice, with a note of bitter triumph. "My name is Lana. I know everything about you, Caleb Hayes, and I know everything about what you did." I stared at Vance's terrified face, my mind spinning like a wagon wheel stuck in mud. In all my years as a gunslinger, I'd never seen the man show fear of anything, but now he looked like a man who just saw a ghost of my own past. The wounded woman spoke again, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the entire canyon. "My name is Lana. I am the last daughter of the Navajo, and I have been waiting for a man like you to find me." She reached into the tattered remnants of her shirt and pulled out a small, folded piece of leather, stained with her own blood. "This is not just any map. It is the only way home for my people. And you are my only hope." The moment Lana spoke, the tension in the air changed from a threat to a tangled web of old lies and new truths. Vance's face was a study in shock and rage. He had come here to finish a job, to collect a bounty, but he had stumbled into a past that haunted him as much as it did me. "You're talking nonsense, squaw," he snarled, his voice regaining its vicious edge. "Cal here is nothing but a coward. He'll cut your throat for that map the second I turn my back." Lana didn't flinch, her gaze, steady and piercing, locked onto mine. "The map is a trick," she said, her voice for my ears only, a low whisper that cut through the desert wind. "It's a fool's errand to a silver mine that doesn't exist. The real treasure is something else entirely." My mind reeled. A trap? A test? I didn't know which was worse. But Vance wasn't the kind of man who went down without a fight. And when cornered, dangerous men did dangerous things. Vance's hand tightened on his pistol grip until his knuckles went white. A cornered animal was always the most dangerous, and I could see the exact moment when the bounty hunter decided that bullets were simpler than truth. "You're all fools," he snarled, his mask of civility finally slipping away. "You think this savage's word means anything against mine? You think anyone will believe the testimony of a dead Indian and a handful of traitors?" The deputies spread out instinctively, hands moving toward their weapons. But I could see the uncertainty in their faces. Years of following orders weighed against the growing realization that those orders might be wrong. Lana struggled to her feet, using the stone well for support. Blood seeped through her fingers where she pressed them against her wound, but her voice remained steady. "The truth doesn't care who speaks it, Vance. It just is." "The truth," Vance spat, "is that you murdered a United States Army officer, and I'm going to collect the bounty on your head." He drew his pistol in one smooth motion, the barrel swinging toward Lana, but before he could fire, Deputy Bradley stepped directly into the line of fire, his own weapon raised. "Stand down, Vance." The words cracked like thunder across the ranch. 4 other deputies followed Bradley's lead, their guns trained on their own commanding officer. Only one man remained loyal to Vance, a grizzled veteran named Hawkins, who looked as corrupt as his boss. "You're making a mistake, boys," Vance said. Sweat now beaded on his forehead. "A mistake that'll cost you your badges. Maybe your lives." "Maybe," Bradley replied, "but I've made enough mistakes following your orders. I won't make any more." I watched this standoff with growing dread. 6 armed men in my ranch yard, all pointing guns at each other, all convinced they were in the right. This was how range wars started. This was how good men died for bad reasons. That's when Lana did something unexpected. Her voice trembled, thin but piercing, carried by the canyon wind. It was enough. She was calling to her people. The song was a signal, a message carried on the evening wind to ears that knew how to listen. I realized this with a chill that ran down my spine like ice water. Lana wasn't just singing, she was summoning. The melody ended and silence fell over the ranch like a heavy blanket. But in that silence, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Hoofbeats, distant but growing closer. Many hoofbeats moving fast. Vance heard them too. His face went pale as moonlight. "How many?" Lana smiled despite her pain. "Enough." The sound grew louder, multiplying until it sounded like thunder rolling across the plains. Not 6 riders this time, not even a dozen. A full Navajo war party was riding toward my ranch, and they would arrive within minutes. Vance raised his pistol again, this time pointing it directly at me. "You did this. You helped her signal them." "I gave a dying man water," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Same as I do for any creature suffering on my land." The hoofbeats were close enough now to feel in the ground beneath our feet. Close enough to count. Too many to count. And Vance finally understood what Lana had been planning all along. They came over the horizon like a vision from another world. Dozens of Navajo warriors on horseback moving in perfect formation, their war paint gleaming in the dying sunlight. But as they drew closer, I realized something that defied everything I thought I knew about Indian war parties. They weren't coming for battle. At the head of the group rode an elderly chief whose presence commanded respect from 100 yards away. His gray hair was braided with eagle feathers, and despite his age, he sat his horse with the dignity of a man who had never bowed to anyone. Behind him rode warriors of every age, from seasoned fighters to young braves barely old enough to carry weapons. But their weapons remained sheathed. Vance's face cycled through confusion, fear, and desperate calculation. He still held his pistol trained on me, but his hand shook like a man with fever. "This changes nothing. I still have my orders." "Your orders," came a new voice, "are no longer valid." Everyone turned to see Deputy Bradley holding up an official-looking document. "This came through this morning. Vance, direct from the territorial governor. All pursuit of Lana is suspended pending investigation into Colonel Morrison's death." Vance's face went purple with rage. "You lying piece of check your own dispatch pouch," Bradley interrupted. "Unless you've been too busy collecting bounties to read your official mail." The Navajo warriors formed a wide circle around the ranch, not threatening, but unmistakably present. Their chief dismounted and walked slowly toward the well where his daughter waited. With each step, the old man's eyes never left Lana's face, searching for signs of serious injury. When father and daughter embraced, a collective sigh seemed to rise from the assembled warriors. I found myself witnessing something sacred, the reunion of a leader with his people, a father with his child, a peace negotiator with those he'd sworn to protect. The chief spoke to his daughter in rapid Navajo, his weathered hands checking the wound, his face grave with concern. Lana responded in the same language, but I caught enough English mixed in to understand the gist, the truth, the conspiracy, the names of the real killers. When the conversation ended, the chief turned to face Vance with eyes like black diamonds. When he spoke, his English was perfect and precise. "Vance, my daughter tells me you came here to murder him." Vance's pistol wavered. "I came here to arrest a fugitive from your own corruption," the chief replied. "A man whose only crime was discovering how you and your friends have been profiting from war between our peoples." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Vance's remaining ally, Hawkins, was slowly backing his horse away from the circle, clearly calculating his chances of escape. "You have no proof," Vance said, but his voice cracked on the words. The chief smiled, not warmly, but with the satisfaction of a man holding all the cards. "We have Morrison's letter. We have the testimony of the real killers who confessed everything before they died trying to escape our justice. And we have something else." He gestured to one of his warriors who rode forward carrying a leather satchel. From it the warrior produced a stack of papers that made Vance's face go ashen. "Your correspondence with the gunrunners," the chief continued. "Every payment, every shipment, every lie you told to cover your tracks. Morrison was more thorough than you knew." Vance's world collapsed in that moment. I watched a corrupt man realize that all his schemes, all his violence, all his betrayals had been for nothing. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses reliable, the justice inevitable, but cornered animals were unpredictable. Vance swung his pistol toward the chief, desperation overriding common sense. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." What happened next moved faster than thought. Lana threw herself between the gun and her father despite her wound. The pistol fired and dozens of Navajo warriors reached for their weapons in perfect unison. But the shot went wild because I, Caleb Hayes, a simple rancher who just wanted to help a thirsty woman, had tackled Vance from behind, sending them both crashing to the ground in a tangle of dust and rage. The dust settled like a curtain falling on the final act of a play. Vance lay motionless beneath me, his pistol thrown clear by the impact. Deputy Bradley and his men quickly secured both Vance and Hawkins, while the Navajo warriors slowly lowered their weapons. But it was what happened next that would stay with me for the rest of my life. The chief walked slowly to where I sat, catching my breath in the dirt. The old man's weathered face showed no expression as he studied this white rancher who had risked everything for a stranger. Then, without warning, he placed both hands on my shoulders and spoke in Navajo words that carried the weight of ceremony, of honor, of recognition. Lana translated, her voice thick with emotion. He says, "You are now brother to our people, that what you did today, showing mercy to an enemy, risking your life for truth, choosing courage over fear, these are the actions of a true warrior." I felt something shift in my chest, like a door opening to let in light I'd never seen before. All my life, I'd been taught that Indians were savages, enemies, obstacles to civilization. But looking into the chief's ancient eyes, I saw only wisdom, dignity, and a kind of respect I'd never earned from my own people. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. The Navajo warriors dismounted and formed a circle around me. One by one, they approached and touched my hand. Not a handshake in the white man's fashion, but something deeper, a recognition of kinship that transcended skin color or culture. When the last warrior had paid his respects, the chief presented me with a gift that took my breath away. A warlance decorated with eagle feathers and intricate beadwork, its shaft worn smooth by generations of hands. "This belonged to my grandfather," the chief explained, "and his grandfather before him. It has never been carried by anyone not born Navajo until today." As the sun set over the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Navajo prepared to depart. Lana's wound had been properly treated by the tribal medicine man, and though she was still weak, she would live to see the peace treaty expanded and the real conspirators brought to justice. Before mounting her horse, Lana clasped my hand one final time. "You saved more than my life today, brother. You saved the peace between our peoples." "I just gave a thirsty man some water," I replied. "Sometimes." Lana smiled. "That's how the world changes, one cup of water at a time." 24 hours later, exactly as the title had promised, they were gone. But they left behind something precious, proof that in a world full of hatred and fear, simple human decency could still work miracles. Vance and Hawkins were tried and convicted of treason, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. The gunrunners' operation was dismantled, and the peace treaty was not only renewed, but expanded to include all the tribes of the territory. And I, Caleb Hayes, a simple rancher who had shown mercy to a stranger, became the first white man in territorial history to be formally adopted into the Navajo Nation. Because sometimes in the brutal landscape of the Old West, the greatest battles weren't won with guns or violence, but with something far more powerful: the courage to see enemies as human beings, and the wisdom to choose compassion over fear. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from, so I don't feel so alone out here. The hoofbeats faded into the distance, leaving only the vast silence of the desert behind. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and bleeding orange. I stood alone in the canyon, the warlance feeling impossibly heavy in my hand, a testament to a truth I'd never believed: that honor could still exist out here. My body was a roadmap of aches and bruises from the brawl with Vance, but my chest felt lighter than it had in decades. The weight of my past, the gunfights, the faces of men I'd killed, the shame of my inaction had been a heavy cloak I couldn't shed. But Lana, a ghost from that very past, had somehow, in one afternoon, lifted it from my shoulders. The silence was broken only by the crackling of the dying fire and the low, mournful cry of a coyote. I felt the absence of Lana like a physical thing, a phantom limb. I had just risked everything for a woman I barely knew, a woman who had seen my deepest shame and still called me a brother. What in the hell had I done? And why, for the first time in forever, did it feel so right? I started walking. The war lance a strange, beautiful burden in my hand, toward a future I still couldn't see. Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you. I walked all night, my mind turning over the day's events like a stone in a prospector's pan, looking for some nugget of sense. My past was a series of ghosts, the Navajo Wars, the Long Walk, we forced them down, a memory that tasted like salt and dust. I was a young gunslinger then, believing in the righteousness of my cause, following orders to the letter. But the desert has a way of stripping away the lies you tell yourself. The hunger, the thirst, the sight of children dying on the trail, it broke something inside me that never mended. And Vance, he was my second ghost. My commanding officer had made a secret deal with a gun-running gang, promising them free passage in exchange for a share of their loot. Vance had discovered it and wanted to expose him, but I was a coward. I watched as Vance was framed and dishonorably discharged. And now he was back, a monster from my past, hunting me down. I had run away from all of it, from the cavalry, from the lies, from the memories, to this God-forsaken ranch. But the desert, I was learning, doesn't let you run forever. It brings your ghosts back to you, one by one. The sun rose, painting the sky in a blinding yellow, and I found myself at the edge of the Navajo reservation. Lana had told me to leave her people alone, that she would be safe. But the doubt gnawed at me. What if Vance came back? He was a cornered animal, and a cornered animal was always the most dangerous. I had to know for sure. I kept to the high ground, watching the winding trails below, my heart in my throat. I saw a small group of Navajo on horseback, a sight that made me freeze. They were old men and women, children, their faces thin and their clothes tattered. They were walking, on foot, like they had been for a very long time. It was the long walk, all over again. The ache in my heart was a dull, constant throb. My guilt was an old friend, a familiar face in the crowd. I wanted to help, to offer them my ranch as a sanctuary. But I knew my presence, a white man, could only bring them trouble. I was the ghost of their past, a symbol of everything they had lost. I kept my distance, following them like a silent guardian. They walked for days, their numbers dwindling as the weakest fell behind. I left food and water for them on their trail, small offerings of a penance I could never truly repay. One morning, I saw an old woman, her face a web of wrinkles, collapse on the side of the road. I knew I couldn't just watch her die. I approached her, my hands raised in a gesture of peace. She looked at me, her eyes clouded with sickness and exhaustion. I offered her water, and she drank it gratefully, her throat making a rattling sound. I asked her, in the few words of Navajo I still remembered, "Where are you going?" "Home," she rasped. "The long walk home." She told me about a promised land, a hidden valley that her ancestors had spoken of in the legends, a place of healing and peace. Lana had been searching for that valley, a place of safety for her people. She carried the map, not to a silver mine, but to a better future. The thought of that beautiful, peaceful place, a place free from the ghosts of my past, filled me with a desperate hope. But hope, as the desert taught me, was a fickle thing. A few days later, as the Navajo group stumbled into a rocky pass, I heard the sound of gunfire. It was Vance and his men. They had survived, and they were back, their rage a palpable thing. I knew what they wanted. They wanted to terrorize the Navajo, to force me out of hiding. I had no choice. I had to face them. I mounted my horse and rode toward the sound of the gunfire, my old gunslinger instincts kicking in. My heart was a drum against my ribs, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't a drum of fear. It was a drum of purpose. I wasn't fighting for myself. I was fighting for them. For the old woman who had told me about the long walk home. For Lana. For all the ghosts who had no one to fight for them. When I arrived, I saw a scene of chaos. Vance and his men, their faces twisted with hate, were firing into the air, forcing the Navajo group to scatter. Lana was nowhere to be seen. I shouted to them, my voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Leave them alone, Vance. Your fight is with me." He turned to face me, a sneer on his face. "Well, well, well, if it isn't the coward. Looks like you've finally decided to grow a spine, Cal." His men laughed, their guns still smoking. "Where is the map, Cal?" he snarled. "I know she gave it to you. That little squaw has guts, but she won't last long in this desert." My blood ran cold. The map wasn't about silver. It was about hope, a hope he would crush for a few pieces of gold. I was not going to let him do that. I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. I wasn't going to be a coward again. The air thickened with the dust and the stench of gunpowder. Vance and his men were a wall of hate, their rifles aimed at me, their faces contorted with a vicious hunger. I could see the rage in Vance's eyes, a fire fueled not just by greed but by the ghost of our shared past. He was the consequence of my cowardice, a monster I had helped create by my silence. And now, he was here, demanding a final reckoning. My hand went to my side, where the butt of my old gunslinger pistol used to be, but it wasn't there. I'd left it behind, a symbol of a past I wanted to leave behind. I had to face him, not as the gunslinger I once was, but as the man I was trying to become. "The map doesn't lead to silver," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It leads to a sacred place, a home for her people. You're a fool, Vance. You're fighting for a lie." His laughter was a dry, hollow sound. "Truth is what I say it is, Cal. And right now, the truth is that you have something I want, and I'm going to take it, one way or another." He raised his rifle, and his men followed suit. "Now, you can either tell me where you hid that map, or I'll make sure you and your little squaw end up as food for the coyotes." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth, my chance to finally make a stand, to do the right thing, no matter the cost. I wasn't a gunslinger anymore. I was a guardian. I was a protector. I was Caleb Hayes, and I wasn't running. "The map is gone." I lied, my eyes locked on his. "She destroyed it. You're hunting a ghost." The lie was a calculated risk. I knew it would enrage him, but it was my only chance. It was also true, in a way. The map to the silver mine was a ghost. The real map, the one to the sacred valley, was in Lana's heart. Vance's eyes narrowed. "You're lying," he snarled. "I know that girl. She'd never give up her people's hope. You're just trying to buy time." He fired a shot, the bullet whistling past my ear, embedding itself in the rock behind me. "One more chance, Cal. Where is it?" The other men raised their guns, their fingers on the triggers. I felt a surge of strength, not from my muscles, but from deep within my soul. I wasn't fighting for my life. I was fighting for a promise, for Lana, for the old woman on the trail, for all the ghosts who had no one to fight for them. "I'll tell you what I'll tell you," I said, my voice rising. "I'll tell you that you're nothing but a coward, Vance. You hide behind your guns and your men because you're too afraid to face your own crimes. You're a thief and a murderer, and you're no better than the people you swore to fight. You betrayed me, you betrayed your men, and you betrayed yourself. And now, you're going to pay for it." The words hit him like a physical blow. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. I had exposed his deepest secret, the one he had tried to bury for years. He had wanted to kill me for what I knew, and now he knew I knew. The fight was no longer about a map, it was about honor and about justice. And I was going to give him what he deserved. He lunged forward, his rifle still in his hands. I moved faster, my old gunslinger instincts taking over. I ducked, and the bullet went wide. I kicked the rifle out of his hands, and it clattered to the ground. We were alone now, in the dust, two old men fighting a war that had started decades ago. He was a vicious fighter, but he was sloppy, fueled by rage. I was calm, deliberate, and I had nothing to lose. I dodged his punches, blocking and parrying, using his own momentum against him. I was a ghost, a blur of motion, a memory from his past come to haunt him. He swung a haymaker, and I ducked, delivering a punch to his jaw that sent him reeling. His face was a mask of shock. He'd expected me to run, to surrender. He'd never expected me to fight back. I had him on the ropes. I was about to deliver the final blow when I heard it. Lana's voice, from a hidden ledge above. "Caleb, "Don't kill him. He is not worth your soul." I froze. Lana had seen me fight with my hands, not a gun, and she had seen my transformation. Her words were a stark reminder of the man I used to be, a man who would have put a bullet in him without a second thought. But I was no longer that man. I looked at Vance, lying in the dust, his face a mixture of fear and defeat. I had him. I could end this. But Lana was right. He was not worth my soul. I knelt down, picked up his rifle, and threw it off the cliff. "It's over, Vance," I said, my voice hoarse. "You lost." His men, seeing their leader defeated, began to back away. Their confidence shattered. Lana descended from the cliff, her face pale but her eyes shining with pride. "You made the right choice, Caleb," she said, her voice a soft melody in the silence. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. The weight of my past, the guilt of my inaction, was gone. I had chosen honor over vengeance, and in doing so, I had finally found my redemption. Vance, his face still a mess of dust and tears, looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. It wasn't respect, not yet, but it was a question. A question I couldn't answer. I had chosen a different path, a different kind of justice, and now he had to live with that. The sun was setting, painting the sky in a blaze of glory. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. If you're watching on television, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the desert fell into a deep, silent peace. The battle was over. The dust had settled, but the final chapter was still unwritten. We stood on the canyon floor, Lana and I, watching the last of Vance's men ride away, a trail of shame and defeat in their wake. Vance was gone too, left to his fate in the unforgiving desert, his future as bleak as the coming night. I felt no triumph, only a quiet sense of finality. I had faced my past, and I had not been a coward. I had chosen a different path, and in doing so, I had found a kind of freedom I had never known. Lana looked at me, her eyes reflecting the last rays of light. "You are a true warrior, Caleb," she said, her voice soft. "Not with a gun, but with your heart." The words were a balm to my weary soul. All my life, I had been searching for a place to belong, a home, a purpose. I had found it not in a ranch, not in the life of a gunslinger, but in this wild, beautiful, and dangerous woman. I took her hand, and the warmth of her touch sent a shock through me, a quiet, humming electricity. We had shared a journey, a long walk home, and in doing so, we had found a home in each other. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments. Lana led me to a hidden trail, a path only her people knew. As we climbed, a new world opened up before us, a stunningly beautiful valley, not of greed, but of peace. This was the sacred place of her ancestors, a new Eden where the Navajo could finally be free. She had fulfilled her mission, and I, a man full of shame, had helped her. But the moment we stepped into the valley, I knew my journey had to end there. My heart was full, but also heavy. As a white man, my presence was a ghost from their past, a painful reminder of everything they'd lost. I had found my honor and redemption, but I had to leave it behind for them to have their peace. With a bittersweet ache, I looked at Lana, then turned my horse toward the setting sun. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Lana stood on a high cliff, her silhouette outlined against the fiery sky. I knew she was watching me go. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The future was unwritten, a blank page waiting to be filled. I would ride, a lone cowboy with a story carved in the dust and blood of the frontier, riding toward justice, carrying her memory into every sunset. Today's story is about pains that seemed to have no way out until a small ray of light changed everything. Do you believe that, even in the darkest times, there's always a miracle waiting at the end of the road? And if deep down you still believe that God is watching over you, quietly arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment, AMEN, below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write it, a blessing may quietly find its way into your life.